Joining us now is Okpe with stories trending around the world. Hello, Oji.
Good morning, Dr.
I like this color. What is this called?
I'm not sure. This one might know. I'm just like you with colors.
Yes. I have no idea.
It's blue, that's all I know. It's the morning show blue.
Yes.
Well, I love it. The morning show blue is of a deeper tint, I think.
Is it? Well,
yeah, but if you say it's blue, it's blue.
This morning.
It's between blue and green. I don't know what.
No, not green at all. I'm actually better than you. Rufai, do you know what color this is?
I'm bad with colors. I'm a man. Is it lilac or something?
It's blue.
Did you say lilac?
Lilac.
Oh, okay. I got
Good morning, Rufai. How are you? Well, good morning to you, viewers. We begin what's trending in Saudi Arabia, where an investigation has revealed that hundreds of African migrants have been locked up in some of the country's COVID-19 detention facilities under terrible conditions. The investigation by a British newspaper, Sunday Telegraph, revealed photos taken by the migrants on their cell phones showing dozens of emaciated men lying on the floor in multiple rows, in small rooms with barred windows. The photos show that the authorities at the facility are subjecting African migrants to squalid, crowded, and dehumanizing conditions with no regard for their safety or dignity. The images have sparked outrage among several human rights activists. Dr. Abati, Rufai, Adesua, when I read the story yesterday, I was in awe. I was shocked that this could happen in an oil-rich nation, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, Saudi Arabia. I mean, I don't know what excuse that they have to have this type of facility in the first place. The facility is in a deplorable state. There was a teenager who committed suicide because they could not take that, the type of treatment. Some officials we've been told, have used electric cords to hit these immigrants on the back. I mean, if you see those images, they're terrible. And, remember we took this story where Saudi Arabia was even donating food aids and all of that. I don't understand. There are 2 detention camps that have been identified. One, I believe, was close to Mecca and another one close to Yemen. Reports are showing that most of the African migrants are from Ethiopia or from Yemen. But Dr. Bati, we've heard the stories of some of our Nigerian women who have been locked up also in some rooms in Saudi Arabia. There was a report I just read, about 45 of them have been locked up in these rooms, and with, they're almost facing starvation because of the treatment that they've been, given so far. I'm just really upset with the story.
Anyone should be, and it is clear that we are actually plunged into a new migrant crisis like we had almost decades ago. And the IOM has been raising alarm that, even with coronavirus, this is not dissuading people from migrating. A lot of countries are dealing with double jeopardies as we know it. The economic front, the health front, they're battling on how do they balance these things. And I don't think that Saudi Arabia, because they have the oil, are exempted or they live in a bubble away from this crisis. They also have the national challenges to face. But it is the way countries are going about it. Human rights activists have been shouting, we cannot simply because of COVID-19 not pay attention to what is going on to migrant crisis. It is deplorable, it is unacceptable, and it is condemnable that you treat any human like this.
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse for it.
I believe also in March, about 3,000 Ethiopians were deported. Even there's a deportation camp that is also in a very deplorable state as well in Saudi Arabia. It is a shame.
And this was a COVID-19. This was a COVID-19 facility they put them into. It is
these COVID-19 detention centers, they are in the southern part of Saudi Arabia. And the question to ask is that why would Saudi Arabia have COVID-19 detention centers? Could this be the case of illegal migrants who have refused to be evacuated so that they could return to their countries? You are right, in March, Saudi Arabia indeed sent away migrant workers, majorly from Ethiopia.
Yes.
About 3,000 of them. As the COVID-19 pandemic raged in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi authorities made it clear that they were willing to evacuate majorly Africans to their countries at their own expense. And you will recall that at some point there were 256 Nigerians who were evacuated at no cost to the Nigerian authorities back home. They were not necessarily persons with COVID-19, but they were persons who wanted to come back. Now, you recall again that we had a story about Nigerian students who were stranded in Saudi Arabia, who claimed that it was the mission, the Nigerian mission in Saudi Arabia, that had not given the Saudi Arabian authorities, the Saudi authorities, the clearance that, look, they will not have any issues coming back to Nigeria. And they were claiming that the Nigerian mission was asking them to pay for the cost of their evacuation, whereas the Saudi authorities were willing to pay. So that's how I say, you know, I find it a bit disturbing that the same Saudi Arabian authorities that had volunteered to pick up the cost of evacuation for migrant workers, for persons who wanted to return home, will now be faced with this story of COVID-19 detention centers, where we're told that people, you know, are subjected to inhuman conditions. They are treated worse than animals. And one of the persons interviewed said that, in fact, there's nobody at those COVID-19 detention centers who does not have one ailment or the other. However, let us note that this is the product of investigative journalism carried out by the Sunday Telegraph of the United Kingdom. And Human Rights Watch has also intervened to say that the condition in those Saudi COVID-19 centers fall short of international standards. And I hope that the Saudi authorities will take the story seriously. And that, you know, the African missions that are in Saudi Arabia will engage the Saudi authorities to find out why this is the case. And in that regard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria and the National Diaspora Commission of Nigeria and the Nigerian mission in Saudi Arabia, they have an assignment cut out for them here to engage the Saudi authorities to find out immediately whether or not there are Nigerians in those detention centers. And for the relevant diplomatic protocols to be activated to make sure that no Nigerian is, you know, a victim of this kind of situation.
Every life matters as well. You know, basically in the detention camp, they said, you know, there was a situation where there was a dead body, they're sleeping between dead bodies, and people are like sick there. You know, before I come to you, Rufai, I would like to take a tweet from a user who wrote, Saudi is supported by the US for arms and oil. That's why they can perform atrocities and get away with it. They are also perceived counterbalance for Iranian influence in the Gulf. If Jamal Khashoggi never got justice, don't expect this too. I mean, I really don't know what Saudi government is going to come back with this story. Rufai.
I mean, there are many angles to the story, but the Khashoggi that guy talked about, Khashoggi's matter is, yes, on ground, but there's an internal balance. So there's a royal family squabble as regards Khashoggi's matter that is deeper than that. Khashoggi is known to the royal family. He knows in and out of the royal family. Let's leave Khashoggi out now. But what I just want to say this is strongly. I'm going to be very harsh and crass. I'm not surprised. And let me take you back historically. Slavery first started to the east before it came to the Atlantic region. So I'm not surprised. It's still the vestiges of slavery, the way Africans are treated. The first African slave went to the east, went to places like this and India afterwards. So we are still treated as though we are slaves from that era. Let's not deceive or deny this fact ourselves. Because it's not only Saudi Arabia. I have interviewed many people, even had them on my shows, that came back from places like even UAE and some other parts like that, where they were promised jobs, and you need to see the working conditions. It is terrible. These were people that were even, you know, legitimate workers that they had salary and things like that. They had to come back. We've heard stories of people being kidnapped. So I'm not surprised about the isolation center. What I want to be taking is action. Be it diplomatic, be we are going to write people. If there's any Nigerian life there, the life should be brought back, because that's a very inhumane condition to have people like this. But mostly it's pervasive in the East. If you remember the Libyan crisis too, Libya.
Just like Libya.
Just like Libya.
Just like Libya.
So it's pervasive across that region. They still see us as slaves. No matter, I might sound very harsh this morning, but that's the blunt truth. But what has to be done? Our people have to be taken out of there. Measures need to be taken to ensure this never repeats itself. Even the job offers, when they say come and work in the UAE or something, when you look at the job, it's appalling.
Good point. Let's take another story. Here in Nigeria, reactions have trailed the governor of Zamfara State, Bello Matawalla's plan to introduce a law that will enforce the death sentence on reckless drivers responsible for the death of their passengers. The governor said such drivers will also be compelled by law to pay compensation on every life lost. Matawalle expressed sadness over the death of 15 persons as a result of reckless driving by a truck driver on Wednesday in the state. He said his administration will introduce speed limit gauge. Drug tests will also be conducted on drivers passing along the major roads in the state in order to guard against rough and reckless driving. I mean, this has raised a lot of, people have been infuriated online, talking about the fact that, it's a death sentence. I'm always against capital punishment. But I think that the governor should, all the steps are great, except for the death sentence. But the governor should go further in introducing a breathalyzer and also come up with all the measures that he really wants to put in place. These measures should be across all states. I mean, it's very important for us to have the speed limit bumps. It's important for us to have the drug tests. It's important for us to have, the breathalyzers, and also very important to, include driving tests and make sure the roads are safe.
I mean, you've said it all. For me, I can't make up my mind about this story because on the one hand, I like it. On the other hand, the death sentence is a problem for me as well. But this is coming at a time when 15 supporters of the governor were killed in that accident.
Which
by
is kind
truck.
of shady. How is that?
All of a sudden, but it's never too late, I guess, to make our roads safer. We've seen one too many needless deaths on our roads. Our roads have now become death traps, either by the condition of the road or by the recklessness of the drivers or the conditions of even the vehicles we put on the road. But we have agencies that should deal with this. Well, I don't understand why the governor is taking this as a priority. I may be wrong, Dr. Batsi, but I think that there are agencies of government that should take care of this. Why is it a priority for the state governor?
Well, the Governor Bello Matawalle, he has expressed concern, and perhaps some of the 16 persons who died, being his supporters, they are known to him, and he went to visit the Emir of Gusau. And he also visited some of the affected families. He promised the widows maintenance allowance every month and also promised them, a particular amount to provide support for them. But I think the major concern we should express is that many of our leaders, they start expressing concern about certain societal ills or omissions only when, lives have been lost, or they have been affected, or persons they know have been affected directly. And hence, I guess, he was speaking, yes, out of compassion, but also out of the fact that he is also grieving, perhaps. However, it is not the duty of the governor to prescribe punishment. He is head of the executive arm. Even if the law is going to be amended in any regard, that is the job of the State House of Assembly. Not the job of the governor to say that he's going to ensure a death penalty. He doesn't have such powers. So people should not, get worked up. That he's just expressing an opinion. It's not something he can enforce. And in any case, the death penalty will be disproportionate to the offense. Now, to take it further, this is why I was talking about agencies. Yes, the appropriate agency will seem to be, in this regard, the Federal Road Safety Commission.
Exactly.
The Federal Road Safety Commission Establishment Act of 2007 talks about, in Section 10 and later in Section 28, subsection 2, it lists traffic offenses and penalties. So some of the things the governor is proposing, like speed limit gauges, checking for drugs and all of that will fall within the purview of the functions of the Federal Road Safety Commission. Now, the Road Safety Commission talks about these offenses and penalties on a regular basis, but how well does the Federal Road Safety Commission, I know you are a Federal Road Safety Commission marshal.
Yes,
so
I am.
Are you really?
I'm
yes,
a special marshal.
She's a marshal.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So how well, is the Road Safety Commission ensuring that these offenses are tracked and persons are penalized as a deterrence? Because if you look at these truck drivers also, they tend to be very reckless. They call themselves the king of the road. Now, the governor has talked about the driver. How about the owners of those trucks?
Exactly.
Who, under the principle of strict liability, have the duty of care to make sure that they don't recruit drivers who are half drunk or are drug addicts or are reckless. Now, you see some companies, they will put a notice on their trucks and say, if this person drives recklessly, call this number. Now, which company really is the owner of this particular truck? Would there be any sanctions for the owners of the offensive truck? Because I see many of those trucks on the road in other parts of Nigeria. It's either the container is unlatched or they are driving recklessly. Some people even suggest that some of these articulated trucks should not move about at certain hours of the day. I don't want to mention the name of the company that was reported in this particular case so that it doesn't look like I'm demarcating them. But the principle applies to everybody involved. We commiserate with the families that have lost their loved ones. But many of these truck-related accidents are totally avoidable.
Let's take a quick tweet before we come to you, Rufai. One user wrote, this is a common tweet, what is the obsession with death up north when nations are reevaluating the death penalty in its entirety? Studies have shown that death penalty has little or no deterrent effect. We should be more creative with the enforcement of traffic laws to cut reckless driving. Rufai.
All right, Masha. I just wanted to be cheeky. At first, I feel the pain of Governor Matawale and commiserations on the death of those that lost their lives. We pray that God will grant them al-Jannah Fidal. For me, I want to ask questions. I want to ask questions about the strength of institutions. Because when things happen like this, we forget that they are institutions. What are institutions supposed to do? They're supposed to uphold society. FRSC, we've been able to point out. What are the strengths of these institutions? How many breathalyzers does the FRSC have in that state? What's the capacity of the FRSC in that state? There are road signs too. I've read the highway code back and forth. How well have the governor put in place these road signs on every road in that state? Because society is like a dance. It takes two to tango. How well have we put in all the necessary infrastructures? While the governor is grieving, what I expect the governor to do is to put everything in place that will ensure that this never happens again within his own capacity. It's not about sentencing them to death. They will still, if you say you sentence them to death, they will still commit it over and over again if you don't put measures in place at stopping it. We also a grand example. When we said armed robbers firing squad, it got to the time, we shot, and we got tired. So the governor has a role to play. Do every road have traffic signs? Do drivers even know traffic signs? All right? Is the governor liaising with saying, okay, any truck driver that's going to drive through my state, they must be aware of traffic signs. They must take training from FRSC. These are the actions we can put in place, not just saying, oh, we're going to put in deterrence. We are so quick to react. The fire brigade approach in this country. Oh, something happens. A big deterrent. We will do this. We will do that. But we don't go back to look at the reasons for this. I think one thing we don't do in this country, or maybe when we do it, we don't take the resolutions from it. Inquest. If anything happens abroad, they always have an inquest, which they take the resolutions from it. The governor should have an inquest as regards road traffic accidents in his state and how we will ensure that this doesn't happen again. If he can do that, then I'll be happy. Apart from that, every other thing might just be all fluff.
Good point. We'll take another story. A conservative French magazine has come under fire after it published a fictional narrative and illustration depicting a French lawmaker as an enslaved African who was put up for auction in the 18th century. The lawmaker, Daniel Obono, is an anti-racism activist who is African and was born in the former French colony of Gabon. She called the illustration an insult to the history of slavery and described it as a political and racist attack. The 7-page fictional narrative published in the magazine Valeurs Actuelles had a series of images, including one of Miss Obono with chains around her neck, entitled Daniel Obono in the Age of Slavery. French politicians from across the political divide have criticized the magazine for its highly offensive portrayal of Miss Obono. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, has also condemned the illustration. I mean, the French president actually called her to apologize and said, he doesn't agree with the illustration, and it is quite racist. I mean, but what really upset me was when Ms. Obono put out a tweet about this, calling it racist. I believe somebody from the magazine responded saying, how is this racist? This is an illustration. It's a fictional illustration. And talking about the fact that there was, slavery, I mean, in Africa, and it was orchestrated by the Africans without an apology. I mean, that really infuriated me at that point. And this goes to show that this whole racism thing is really going to take generations if we're not changing our mindset. I mean, how can a magazine not think that this illustration is racist in any way?
It is outrageous. I mean, what were they thinking? So the backstory is that this is part of a series of short narratives depicting contemporary political figures in historical days. And so there's a way, for me, there's a way to tell a story about the painful past without being insensitive. There are no two ways to this. The magazine was insensitive, it was callous, it's outrageous, it's racism. There's no other name to call it.
Well, the name of the magazine is Valeurs Actuelles, established in 1966. The magazine is a weekly news magazine, and it's right-wing.
It's right-wing,
It's far-right, extremely conservative.
Yes.
So they have this 7-page narrative authored by a guy under a pseudonym called Hapalus, which they publish on a weekly basis, focusing on political figures. Now, the magazine has since apologized, but the editor you were quoting was the deputy editor, who said that, look, they are not your regular news magazine.
So upset.
That is the DNA of the paper.
Yes, they're not politically correct.
And Daniel Obono was also accused of being part of the ideological enterprise of the falsification of history. I'm quoting directly.
Yeah.
And I guess what the news magazine is reacting to is the fact that she's been an anti-racism activist and has been very outspoken. So you see that there is malicious intent in this idea of fictionalizing her and putting a chain around her like a slave from the 18th century. So it's malicious, it's insulting. She herself has said this is an assault on her identity, on her history, and what she represents. Now, the editors of Valeurs Actuelles, they may be stubborn about what they claim that they are doing, but they need to be reminded that, yes, there is editorial freedom, there is the freedom of the press, but it also has its limits. There's no basic right that is expansive to the extent that you encroach on the freedom of the other or the dignity of the other. As we saw, for example, in one regard, in 2005, when a Danish newspaper, cartoonist, did a series of cartoons that Muslims considered offensive, and that degenerated into protests, not just in Denmark or Europe, but across the world. And we've also had another case of a Danish cartoonist who was murdered for doing a cartoon that was considered offensive. So while the editors of Valeurs Actuelles insist that they are politically incorrect, they must also know that they do not have the license to violate the rights of others. And I think Daniel Obono has appropriately protested, and across political parties,
it's been rejected all
in
around.
France, there have been protests and condemnation of the publication.
Yes, your take on this story, Rufai?
I think we need to be careful, and it's shocking that France has not put off the shackles of slavery and racist past, and it's quite very shocking for me in this day and age. But I'm not surprised. It's the likes of Marine Le Pen that propagate ideas like this, the Front National, the political party in France that propagate ideas like this. And it's quickly deepening in. And when you check Europe landscape, this is the way it is across Europe. In Holland, for instance, there's another man, Geert Wilders, to propagating ideas of nationalism, trying to throw other people under the bus. But Dr. Abati, I'm happy you talked about the Danish incident. The newspaper should remember the case of Charlie Hebdo, which we all went and said, oh, je suis Charlie, because we wanted the right, of freedom of press to be upheld because there were shootings and things like that. But let's not also forget the way Charlie Hebdo too made some depictions So, as you have said rightly, because we have rights, we should also be very considerate of others. And that's what scares me about what is happening in France. With the resurgence of parties like Front National, the National Party in France, and there's a resurgence of things like this, you know, trying to rewrite the racist narrative across board. And we need to understand that it is all done because there's a resurgence in the African narrative. There's Black Lives Matter in America. This is going on. African people are constantly aware. There's Wakanda. African people are on the front burner. We're asking for what truly belongs to us. What that newspaper should be talking about was how to pay reparations to millions of Africans they exploited here, not depicting African in that light. Because they should pay for what they did here, for how they came and carted away our resources. They should pay for how most of the African currencies are still domiciled in their banks in France. These are issues we should talk about. How after colonialism, Africa is not truly free. But what would they do? They will propagate this essence of nationalism. Even Africans that are bright, shining stars in France, they still take them and let them remember that they are slaves. It will not work. It will not work. Enough is enough. Well, enough is enough.
It is.
Yenema.
I mean, the French magazine in its right saying that, you know, we're trying to talk about the horrors that was organized by Africans in the 18th century, really, you know, pushing it back to us that, you know, we were the orchestrators of this, you know, slavery process.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
It's
The main argument in this reconstruction of the narrative, you know, the narrative is simply that, look, Europeans were the ones responsible for slavery in Africa. The whole objective that they were trying to prove is to reconstruct the narrative to say that, look, Africans themselves were complicit. That Africans were also part of that slavery process, enslaving their own people.
It's wrong.
But then to take a contemporary figure and then ridicule her
completely
just for the purpose of ideological difference is the problem here with regard to Daniel.
I want to say this real quickly, and I'm sad and surprised at I'm ashamed for the French people. I mean, for that, no, not the French people now, that particular magazine doing this, because the French people went through this. They went through the revolution. They went through the revolution where the king was everything. Louis XVI fed fat, while the people of Paris, the Parisians, suffered. They went through societal stratification that slavery brings. That was why when Napoleon came back, the first thing he brought about, the new code in France, was liberté, égalité, et fraternité. Means liberty, equality, and brotherhood. So they know what it means to be unequal. They should search their conscience, that magazine. They should search their conscience.
Well said, Rufai. Let's take our final story. The world is continuing to pay tribute to actor Chadwick Boseman, who died on Friday after a 4-year battle with colon cancer. To honor the actor, Marvel Entertainment shared a video on Twitter featuring appearances from many of Chadwick's Marvel co-stars with the caption, "You will always be our king." Let's take a look.
It was Chadwick Boseman's performance in 42 that really made us take a second look. There is such an honor and dignity to the way that he played Jackie Robinson that we knew we needed for the character of T'Challa, the Prince of Wakanda.
Chadwick, you know, he has a lot of depth. It was amazing as an audience member to look into his eyes and see what's going on.
We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe.
What doesn't Chadwick bring to the character? I mean, he's regal and grounded, and he brings a gravitas to it. So all of this feeds his T'Challa, and I think he wore the crown with dignity.
Ibombe! 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 Ibombe!
I mean, Chadwick is just a powerhouse. He's so talented. Every single movie he's made, there's kind of this internal, almost nobility.
The Black Panther has been the protector of Wakanda for generations.
He's such a soulful actor, and so professional, so present. It really gives so much to the other person, and he's awesome. And his presence on set, I think, kind of raises the stakes a little bit for everybody.
Chadwick he's a really smart, interesting, dynamic guy, and I think he was not overwhelmed, but very surprised and somewhat taken aback by the amount of love. It ceased to become just about how well he inhabited the role and all that stuff. It's become part of our culture just as a symbol.
This welcome is one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced.
It's fun to watch just what it means to people. At times, in my head, I'll be like, well, what does this do for the world? Like, actually, what is it? You know, is it actually valuable in this climate? And I have to say, yes, it actually is. Not because it makes people escape. I think when done right, it gives people hope. I found that it means a lot.
This
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. It was quite heartbreaking. It was a 5-minute video that, you know, the Marvel stars, plus the directors and producers put together to honor him. I mean, the story of Chadwick Boseman, it's not just the fact that he was a superhero. The fight that he went through with colon cancer and all the stories, the backstories that have come out of his from his death is really what is most inspiring for me. I remember watching him at one of these premieres when he was talking about 2 boys that had cancer, and he broke out in tears. People didn't understand why he was crying. He was
because
crying.
A lot of people didn't know what he was even going through.
Nobody knew he was going through all the things he was going through. And, you know, the idea of what this Marvel pictures have come up with, having, you know, a black superhero in our generation at this point, I think is one of the most important things that Hollywood has done so far.
You know, he was asking a question in one of his interviews he granted, and he said, you know, sometimes he wonders, what does this do for the world? Yes. And he answered by saying it inspires hope. It's way beyond hope. Yeah. It's an inspiration, like you said, for a generation that, you know, have never seen superheroes in their own color. Inspired a new generation of young men and women who could relate to say, okay, so superheroes are not just all, you know, white and different colors, but they can be black as well. And that's what Wakanda did. And that is what Boseman did. To think that he had the power, the strength, in the middle of cancer, to film 7 movies. Yes. I'm in awe of what he was. I mean, he remains a true king even in death.
You know, that interview I was talking about, he said those 2 boys, that was what made him go in, because they really said they were going to stay alive because they wanted to see the film come into fruition.
And we're here wondering why is it
Boseman,
so much?
Well, the tributes have been very moving.
Very.
The attention, posthumous attention that he has also received is an indication of the impact he was able to make within the short period of a career that was cut short by colon cancer, and which nevertheless still held a lot of promise. And the lesson of his life is how, you know, when people distinguish themselves, they will be appreciated, either when they are alive or when they are gone. Now, yesterday, we talked about his strength and courage in the face of colon cancer. He was diagnosed of colon cancer after the film Black Panther, where he played the lead role of King T'Challa. And you could see that in spite of his illness, stage 3 colon cancer, he remained productive, as Adesua has pointed out. And also, he's also been appreciated in terms of the depth of his talents. He was a true artist. He was a perfect exemplification of what Nina Simone refers to as to be young, gifted, and black. Yes. Now, and you see all of that in the various works that he did, notably the biopics, where he played Jackie Robinson in 42, Thurgood Marshall in Marshall, and James Brown in Get On Up. And at the time he died, he had just finished work on August Wilson's, Marini's Black Bottom. And, you know, that was sponsored, by the way, by Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
And it will be it will come out on Netflix later in the year. And his relationship with Denzel Washington is also something that is instructive in terms of how an older artist can mentor a young artist. Now, when Boseman was a student in Howard University, he had issues with school fees, with payment of fees. So an anonymous figure paid on his behalf. Denzel Washington. It turned out it was Denzel Washington.
It was Denzel, yes.
And Denzel Washington was his hero. So it was much later that it was revealed to him that it was Denzel Washington that paid his fees. So he wanted to be the next Denzel Washington. He got very close to it, if I may say that. But now death has abbreviated all of that. But he will be fondly remembered for, as I said, his strength of character, his gifts, his talent, and the depth of his work as an artist.
Yes, Rufai, a quick comment from you.
That's all. Unfinished greatness.
Unfinished greatness for Chadwick Boseman. You know that topic on Denzel. You know, Denzel, when he got to the premiere for Black Panther, and they were like, oh, he never actually met Chadwick at the whole time. And he was like, you know, I'm not really here to watch the movie. I'm here for my money. Pay me my money. It was so cute to watch him say that. And this is the whole idea. You know, you never know where your support is going to end up going. I mean, imagine if he, you know, never got, you know, his tuition right, or, you know, dropped out of school. Who knows? You know, so it's a whole beautiful story surrounding Chadwick Boseman that I think that his legacy will just continue to live on forever.
Audrey, my greatest joy will be to get Dr. Abati to do the Wakanda. At least
we have a challenge. Dr. Abati, right now we're getting
okay.
Dr. Abati, that was excellent.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. Yeah.
And you know what the thing about the Black Panther is about the theme of Afrofuturism.
Yes.
A technologically advanced, you know, African country. We hope we'll get there. We'll move from fiction to that reality.
I think we're getting there. Yes, I think we're getting there.
It is also not how far, but how well. And that's what I think I'm learning from this very painful death. If it's from Arotile, our own very, you know, Arotile who died so young, or Chadwick, very young people, but impactful life. So it's not how far, but how well.
Thank you very much, OJ.
Thank you, Dr. Abati.
We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Adesa. Thank you, Rufai.
And that's all on this edition of The Morning Show.